Hello everyone and welcome to the original Hyrule Warriors on the Nintendo Wii U, not the Definitive Edition, which I don't really like as much. And I wanted to go a step further and play this game as it was released with no updates or patches, but that's actually impossible on the Wii U, because after you've updated a game or downloaded a patch at least once, the Wii U sets a flag and now you can't play that game unless it's updated. Even if you delete the update, can't start the game from the disc, gotta re-download the update. That's trash, and that means the only way to play this game in its perfectly original state would be to factory reset your Wii U and then make sure it's never connected to the internet. It also means that when Nintendo's update servers go down, if you don't have the update for this game downloaded on your Wii U already, you can't play the game anymore without factory resetting your Wii U. Anyway, now that I'm done rambling about how corporations and bureaucracy are ruining art, we can talk about Hyrule Warriors. Hyrule Warriors is a Musou game that I am playing because I like Musou games and because I still have 24 hours of Musou games to play. Hyrule Warriors is quite a different game from other Musou games in a few ways. You do capture keeps and whatnot, and you are meant to keep track of your allies and their status so that way they don't fall in battle. But there's something essential missing from Hyrule Warriors that's in Dynasty Warriors, and it's replaced with a few other things. The most noticeable difference in Hyrule Warriors from other Musou games is how officer combat has changed. Officer combat being combat with those guys that actually have health bars. You see, in regular Dynasty Warriors, you approach an officer and you decide which combo is best to use, and you use that combo until the officer dies. Sometimes you might have to retreat. But in this game, the officers, which are usually monsters, have set attacks they like to use, and after using some of them, they become vulnerable for a brief period. And if you attack them enough while they're vulnerable, you can initiate a finishing move. This definitely adds a greater degree of engagement to the officer combat. There's nothing, bad to say about it. It just makes the game more strategic, makes it more fun to play. It was a good decision all around, and it helps set the Nintendo Musou games apart from any other Musou games. Something else Hyrule Warriors also excels at is they try to create fun and unique level gimmicks for each of the Legend Mode stages. You're never doing the same thing from level to level. Sure, you're always killing dudes and capturing keeps, but there's always some manner of interesting strategic gimmick at play. Like, for example, in this one, when we do finally confront Zelda and Link with the intention to destroy them and obtain the final piece of the Triforce, it's not as simple as defeating them separately. As long as one of them is still active, the other one will eventually revive. This means we have to take them out one after the other within a relatively short time frame. And when they're all the way across the map, this can be difficult, so we might need to lure them or simply just play the battle in such a way that they're not as far apart as they would be otherwise. What I like to do personally is you see that purple bar up in the top left of the screen that's full right now? That bar fills up when we use our attacks, or specifically when we use our combos that end in an X press. And when that bar is full, if we press X outside of a combo, we do a devastating slam that annihilates enemies' health bars. It doesn't necessarily completely destroy boss enemies, but it does deal a significant chunk of damage. So getting both Zelda and Link low in health, and then using that attack, seems to be the best method to quickly deal with them both, at least the way I play the game. And that is fun. This level is a fun puzzle, figuring out how to destroy Zelda and Link quickly, so that way they don't have a chance to revive. And Ganondorf is a really fun character to solve the puzzle with because of that purple bar he has up there. Some other examples of really fun level gimmicks include the one in Death Mountain, where you need to capture keeps so you can send boulders flying to Lord Darunia's chambers. And stop boulders from being flung towards your own base, of course. My personal favorite gimmick is the one in the Sealed Grounds, where there are people gradually turning traitor, and then even after that you have to fight Demise, complete with use of the Grusinator if Demise tries to attack a keep that you currently hold. In addition to the variety in level gimmicks and the different officer combat, Hyrule Warriors also has big boss characters, like Goma, Manhandla, and what's his name? King Dodongo? Yeah, that's him. And they're quite different from anything in any other Musou game. They are massive, just like officer enemies, they have their weaknesses, but you really primarily only deal damage while they're vulnerable. And that's kind of what I dislike about them, but it's Zelda. It's pretty Zelda that you can only hurt them while they're specifically, explicitly vulnerable. It fits with the license. I have been told that the variety in level gimmicks is downplayed immensely, or maybe not even present at all, in Age of Calamity by my roommate who's played Age of Calamity. But I haven't really played it myself outside of the demo, so I suppose I'll see anyway. I do really dislike Definitive Edition for its change in the narrative structure and the addition of new characters, and I mean, it's not like you shouldn't be allowed to have those things if you want them. I just kind of wish that the original version was playable in its entirety as well, but most people probably wouldn't see the differences as significant enough for you to want to play one over the other, which is sad in its own way. But I have a pretty hardline stance on things like that. You should be allowed to play art as it's released, experience art as it's released. This doesn't just apply to video games. And you know, with Hyrule Warriors, it's not as though it's impossible for you to experience the original. You just need to buy a Wii U and Hyrule Warriors, and make sure your console is not connected to the internet ever. Otherwise, Hyrule Warriors will update, and then you'll have to play the updated version instead of the original version. But that's the Wii U's problem, not Definitive Edition's problem. Definitive Edition is not coming in here literally erasing the original game or anything. Nintendo already did that themselves with the way the Wii U handles updates. And it may seem like I'm being curmudgeonly, but, like, I really don't think it's fair to call something the same art if significant creative changes have been made, even if those creative changes were supposedly to improve the experience. Everything that happens in a piece of art is part of that art. Recently, I came into possession of Deadly Premonition 2, for example, and what do I see when I put the game card into my Switch? It wants to update. No, absolutely not, especially not in a game like Deadly Premonition 2. What could they possibly have updated? Did they fix some of the technical bugs? Did they change something in the narrative? Either way, no. You figure Deadly Premonition, of all the franchises in video games, would know not to try and fix stuff. It's too late now. Your art already exists, the world can already see it, there's no taking it back, and I'm not about to let you try. Alright, so we're finally at the part of the level I was talking about, where we have to fight Zelda and Link, and we have to destroy them in pretty close time frame. They're also reasonably strong, especially for where my Ganondorf is leveled currently. And I'm absolutely sure there's some other things I could be doing in the narrative or on the battlefield to make this fight easier. But I can also just elect to be bullheaded and tackle the problem directly, which is not something that this game lets you do always. That's a big difference between this and Dynasty Warriors as well, is that Dynasty Warriors game design is made for you to be able to tackle it in a variety of fashions. But with Hyrule Warriors, it's often the case that you either tackle it the game's way or not at all. It's not that there's no degree of freedom. I can think of a couple times where I definitely did something the way that the game didn't want me to, and it still let me, but it's not as common. And I think it really hurts something that I thought was special about Dynasty Warriors. In Dynasty Warriors, it's expected that you'll be replaying stages many times, and all of the events and triggers in Dynasty Warriors are meant for the player to circumvent or interrupt or intercept in some way. Like, if you know what triggers an event flag, you can beat it there, you can stop it from triggering altogether sometimes, or you can intercept enemies en route to the flag and trigger a different flag entirely. That way you can just sort of make the battle play out in a completely different fashion. And that's rad. You dictate the flow of battle by understanding how the battle goes and just deciding to alter reality to your preferences. Doing things in a different order or using your brain to figure out what would happen if you disrupted an order that already exists is just a rewarding pastime in Dynasty Warriors. But in Hyrule Warriors, that's extremely discouraged. You have to do things the way the game wants you to most of the time, and even when you do disrupt an existing order, it usually doesn't change anything meaningful. And sometimes it even goofs up stuff in a way that just ruins the story. For example, the final fight with Volga, where he's meant to have his character development, he's being bolstered by dark magic, and you're supposed to not fight him until he confronts Zelda. And then when he confronts Zelda, Zelda tells him that he's basically not even himself anymore, that if he needs dark magic to win, he's no longer a proud dragon knight, he's just a puppet. So he dispels the dark magic and decides that he will fight using his own strength, and whatever happens, he has no regrets. But you can just kill him before he rendezvous with Zelda. And then none of that dialogue occurs, but he still says that he has no regrets. Just a little more thought put into what if the players decided to do something different would have been appreciated. None of this means I dislike Hyrule Warriors, it's just a particular difference that I'm not fond of. I think we'll see a much better demonstration of what I'm talking about in real time in the next level. So about the narrative in Hyrule Warriors, I'm actually a pretty big fan of it, particularly the character of Cia and Lana. I love their emotional struggle. I love the final showdown with Cia in the Valley of Seers. I don't so much like the part where you start playing as Ganondorf, and then shortly after that you have to take down Ganondorf. There's just not as much emotional content there. There's no more drama or character development. Everybody's all done with that stuff. So it's just about charging in and defeating the bad guy. Cia being defeated and everybody going back home, that was the big emotional conclusion to the narrative, but then Ganondorf also, because Ganondorf has to be here, and I'm not really sure there's any changing that. It's just a part of the game that I don't like as much. So if you've played the game up until this point, when this level starts, you might look at the map, and you'll see that there's an enemy unit right there near the center. That's Girahim. And when I played this level the first time, I rushed to that enemy unit. Because of course I did. That's what you do in this game, is you defeat enemy units and capture keeps. So I ran forward to defeat Girahim. And it turns out you just can't defeat him, but there was really no way for me to know this because the dialogue takes forever to catch up to what you're doing in this game. Sometimes it takes a minute and a half to catch up to what you're doing, or more. Like, see how low Girahim's health is? It just won't go any lower now, no matter how much we pound on him. And the dialogue isn't giving me any hints as to why. In fact, in a moment the dialogue will tell me to take down Girahim. Yeah, right there. Now it's telling me to take him down, and I'm trying, but it's not working. Why? Why won't he die? We have to be careful, though. The desert is extremely hot. Yeah, but why isn't Girahim dying, game? What do you mean mission start, defeat Girahim? I've been trying. What do you want me to do? I'm clearly kicking his ass. What more can I do to sate your desire for bloodlust? He just won't go down. And then to make matters worse, the game goes on talking about seemingly unrelated garbage, like how hot it is in the desert again. And when that's finally done, when all of that is done, at long last, Girahim will say, "Oh, you appear to be a bit stronger than I expected. Time to run away." And maybe you think now you can intercept him and stop him from running away? That you can finally deal that final blow? But no, you can't. Weird, huh? What you actually have to do is wait for Girahim to cross a certain threshold, and then you can defeat him. And we can see exactly where that threshold is. I'm just not letting him cross it. Alright, we're almost there. Alright, now we can defeat him. Yep, he just had to walk into this keep, because if he didn't walk into this keep, then the trap wouldn't have triggered. You can see the game kind of falling apart at the seams just because I decided to use my brain. And I'm not playing chess over here, I just saw an enemy unit, ran to defeat it, and then proceeded to be confused for a solid minute about why he wouldn't die. The dialogue often struggles to keep up with what the player is actually doing, like that. And I think it's deeply unfortunate, because in normal Dynasty Warriors games, it's expected that you would try and do things like that, or even that you would have foreknowledge of how the level would go, because the levels are meant to be replayed. Just not in Hyrule Warriors for some reason. Hyrule Warriors expects that you will probably stand still and read all of the dialogue until it tells you exactly what to do, and then go do what it tells you to. That seems to be what they want. You might notice even now the dialogue isn't really keeping up with what's going on. It's like the characters speaking are on a completely different plane of time from what's occurring in reality. And I know where the level goes from here. We'll defeat Zant, we'll be asked to rendezvous with Lana, and then I'll rush over to Lana and stand right by her side, but the game will insist I have not rendezvoused with her yet, because the flag has not triggered. So even though we're running around her in a circle, wondering why this doesn't count as rendezvousing, it's just because the game decided it's not time yet. And I know this may seem like nitpicking, but the objectives in a video game should be able to follow along with what the player's doing. It should be able to keep up. But that's enough of that. We have some time before the next anything interesting happens, so let's talk about the stuff I liked about the game's story some more. I really loved the part in the narrative where Sia was summoning enemies just with, like, her body, with her essence itself, because that hasn't been done in the game prior to that moment, and you just see a bunch of red dots appear on the map after Sia shouts something, and it's like, oh my god, is she just willing enemies into existence with her soul? And it turns out that's what's happening, and it's pretty chilling. Like, how much of her body, her consciousness, is being devoted to just creating a bunch of soldiers out of nothing. There's no going back from that. And, you know, Lana's begging her to stop, but it's too late. And then she does it even more later in greater numbers. Sia has to know she's not going to survive, but she's just that devoted to getting what she believes she deserves. She can't live with the love sickness she has. And I really feel like that kind of devotion is a bit underexplored in a lot of fiction, because love sickness is extremely powerful and pervasive. Having a villain that's almost entirely motivated by love sickness is pretty powerful, I think. I wish there were more of that. And I feel like there's a pretty decent number of people out there who have been so crushed because they can't have the person they feel they deserve, that they would try to alter reality to make it happen, especially if that were actually within their power. And people who are lovesick are some of the most vulnerable people of all. It, like, consumes their life. All they can think about is the person they love, and manipulating Sia in that circumstance makes perfect sense. It also makes sense that she'd be even more desperate coming out of that manipulation. And I mean, you can't show people like that winning, especially not in a narrative like Hyrule Warriors, which is pretty traditional, because it's not healthy to be that way. That's not a healthy relationship. Hyrule Warriors even goes the extra mile to put a moral at the end, an explicit one. I mean, most stories have morals, but sometimes they're explicit about it, like Hyrule Warriors is, where Lana's like, sometimes you just don't get the person that you feel you deserve, and you have to live with it. As hard as that sounds, there's no escaping it. That's just life. The final scenes with Sia are kind of like confrontations with a villain straight out of My Little Pony, with the exception that Sia dies, and villains in My Little Pony tend not to die. It's pretty heartfelt and wholesome and emotionally powerful, and it made all of the narrative build-up worth it. But then after that, Ganondorf shows up, and you gotta fight Ganondorf, and they just don't do any more emotional stuff. Anyway, I know exactly where Zant and Girahim spawn, so we're gonna run there. The game doesn't expect us to know where they spawn, and it would seem to me that they might not have even expected you to replay this level at all, because when you arrive there and wait around for them to spawn, they just pop in out of thin air without so much as a cursory attempt at animation. Anyway, back to the story. Even though I love Hyrule Warriors gameplay and its narrative, I feel like they're at conflict with each other a bit often. Like, we've already gone over how it's practically impossible for the dialogue to keep up with what you're actually doing, and how you can ruin the character development of Volga just by trying to destroy Volga before the game wants you to. But there's also the great character development for Link. When he fights the shadow versions of himself, he has to learn that being a hero doesn't mean going it alone, that he's not the destined one because he's just so great. It's because of the power he wields through his friends. And that's wonderful. That's the cheesy, sappy stuff that I come for. That's the good stuff. But in the gameplay, you can be as methodical, careful, sensible, and cooperate with your friends as much as you like. It still plays out the same. The game still pretends that you are utterly reckless as Link, no matter what you do. A plot point where Link is reckless and then learns a lesson from that recklessness doesn't make sense if the player controlling Link does not behave recklessly. Normally games try to fix this by making that sort of thing take place entirely in cutscenes. Hyrule Warriors just decided that the gameplay should be part of the equation and rely on the player acting in a way that benefits the narrative. But anyway, I think that's enough Hyrule Warriors for now. It's a solid 2 levels of Hyrule Warriors. I got to talk about the things I wanted to involving Hyrule Warriors. I'd say that's good.